Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As Daniel said, my name is Brendan. I'm down from New South Wales. May I say, it is an absolute honour to address you all here today in the first of what I hope is many future policy and debates about the Republic for the AFP in the future. Let me start by first paying my respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whitehouse people, and the elders past, present, and of course in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republic, as we know, the Republic, as much as we hope it to be, is not inevitable. Despite the sycophantic ideology of the current federal government, Australians are less inclined to support a republic now than they were 16 years ago. The ANU poll released this week showed only 29% of Australians strongly favour a republic. The numbers of those who strongly favour a monarchy has increased from 9% back in 1999 during the referendum to 23% this year. Support for a republic as a whole has dropped almost 12% in the same time. The only people we have to blame for this are ourselves, as active members of the Republican movement. While the nation was unified in its condemnation of the reintroduction of knighthoods, and again the awarding one to the Duke of Edinburgh, we lost the momentum. Sure, we had a bounce of polls, we had some more membership applications put out for this group and for the Australian Republican movement, but as a whole, we didn't propose any alternative that captures the imagination of the Australian public. We didn't inspire them to rally to our cause, and we didn't take full advantage of the public's outrage and turn that into something positive for this movement. But how do we generate support for a republic? How do we convince the undecided and, more importantly, convert those who defend the monarchy, actively or inadvertently, to believe that the republic is the only way forward for Australia? The answer is not simple. We must first convince the public that the republic is essential to our nation's character and status. And we must reassure them, though, that the presidency is not going to end up another partisan jobs for the boys role that the government dishes out to its colleagues or MPs on the way out. The presidency must be the embodiment of all things good about this nation. It should be our leading light. It should be a figure of national pride that unites us and inspires us. We'll leave the day-to-day rugby politics to the Parliament. To do this, the Republic must be elected directly by the public. This is not simply a reaction to the failure of the 1999 referendum. It is essential that if the people of Australia believe that they have ownership of the Republic, they must be directly involved in its process. Many Australians rejected the 1999 model because they perceived it as elitist and undemocratic. They feared we would end up with some retiring MP who the government simply wanted to get out of the way. Others feared that they would not be an impartial referee, but in fact accountable to the government that appointed them. Someone trusted with the reserved powers of that the monarch currently holds in our Constitution, but without the intention to use it for fear of upsetting the Prime Minister who appointed them. Now I understand and appreciate the arguments of those who advocate for a parliamentary appointed head of state. And many notable nations have such a system in place themselves. A president appointed by Parliament would be someone connected to the government, someone who understood how our system works, and was not some celebrity whose lack of experience could undermine the presidency. Advocates of this system fear that a directly elected president would be partisan and hold some sort of electoral mandate that could undermine the government and create a constitutional crisis. Now, these concerns can be addressed in a number of ways. For example, by requiring candidates to resign from any political party that they are a part of before being able to run for office, we ensure that we are electing and nominating a candidate who is independent of the government, and we can ensure that they are not being elected because they hail from a particular ideology, but by the virtues that they can campaign for initially when they ran for presidency. They would campaign on their management and negotiation skills, and perhaps philanthropy work or a passion for all things Australian, rather than proposing a policy, rather than proposing an idea or a vision, so to speak. Adding to this, ministers and members of parliament should be required to wait at least 10 years or so after leaving office before even considering running for presidency, again to alleviate the same concerns. Another way of addressing the issue of partisanship for a presidency is by having the office of president and the campaigns for it publicly funded. Now, this idea is still experimental around the world, but the principal idea is that candidates receive no funding from political parties, lobbyists, interest groups, or even private individuals. To be eligible, of course, a candidate would need to sign a declaration or intention to run and have a quota or a number of citizens, enrolled voters, sponsor them. And by setting this at a high number, we can ensure that the candidates who are running are very serious and very professional, and also popular, so in order to run. A candidate whose lack of experience, which is another concern a lot of people bring up, could be overcome by providing the president with their own staff, and advisors who would guide them around any and all constitutional matters that may need their attention. And those descriptions would naturally be set up by the public service, and so to ensure it only employs the best people. So, ladies and gentlemen, so far we can see that we need a model of presidency where the official is directly elected, non-partisan, whose election is publicly funded and well supported by the public service. As of yet, we have no one single model that fits this description, but I believe I have theorised just the thing this country needs in terms of a republic. Allow me to introduce the Commonwealth Presidential Council. When designing this model for a republic, I was struck by one thing: the role of the governors and the territory administrators. Naturally, these roles would become democratised alongside the presidency, and they would carry out much the same duties that they carry out under the current system. But could they be more than that? Now, I know this slide looks just a little confusing, but allow me to explain. Under the CPC model, the Commonwealth President and the State and Territory Deputy Presidents, as they will be retitled, would derive their authority from the embodiment of Federation itself, a Council of Presidents who are elected by the public and funded independently by the government. The model for election for the Presidential Commonwealth Council would work similar like this. Oh, sorry, I've skipped a few pages there. The candidate would declare their intention to run for either the Presidency of Australia or the State or Deputy Territory Presidency. For the President of Australia, they would require a quota of 5% of eligible voters across the country to be eligible to nominate, and for to nominate for the electoral funding and to officially endorse some 850,000 voters in Australia. The other territories, state and territories would have, and they're the figures for the other states, the 5% for each individual state. As you can tell, only someone with some serious backing or some serious popularity would be able to receive this many number of people. And of course, we can also utilise the internet in the best possible way to help bring these numbers. The amount of funding each candidate would receive would be set by the Electoral Commission, and an appropriate level would be dispersed between all candidates across the country inside each of the jurisdictions. Legislation would also be needed to support these campaigns with a certain amount of free television and airtime per candidate, as is currently being experimented with in the United States. Yes, it does mean that Australian presidential elections would be more expensive, which is why we should have lengthy terms, 6 years per term, so as we don't have these elections often. But also, if something is worth doing, it is worth doing right. And the cost of the election would be outweighed by the quality of the candidates that we nominate and would end up getting elected. And the quality of the campaign would be different because it would be an impartial debate about management and negotiation skills and connections to Australia. And it wouldn't be dirty mudslinging and negativity that we so often see in our current election campaigns. There will be, as is custom here in Australia, no limit on the amount of terms that a person can nominate for. Now, once the election results are declared and the presidents are sworn in by the High Court of the Chief Justice of the High Court and the State Supreme Justices and so on, the presidents will return to their state homes and they will carry out their duties and meet in a bi-monthly council to report on all constitutional matters to everyone. However, pressing issues or concerns could be raised and could be grounds to call for an extraordinary Commonwealth Presidential Council meeting. Now, an extraordinary meeting would be called for something along the lines of using the reserved powers of the Constitution, or intent to use them, or navigating through a difficult constitutional crisis. In such a meeting, we would discover the uniqueness of this model, as the Council would be able to sit down with their staff and with consultation of the other members to negotiate an acceptable outcome for all parties involved and in a non-partisan way. An extraordinary meeting could also be called for one other unique feature of this model, and that would be the calling of a presidential commission of inquiry. Now, these would be similar in scope to the royal commissions that we have in our current system, except the terms of reference could be set by the Commonwealth Council instead of just by the government. Now, the reason for this would be if, say, a Senate committee or a corruption body found that there's grounds for an inquiry, and the government of the day chooses to ignore that advice. And in this current stage, we have to wait until the government is replaced or the government bows to pressure to hold such an inquiry. Under the CPC model, the people could petition the presidency, and the presidency could call an extraordinary meeting and vote to overrule the government and set the terms of reference for a presidential committee itself and make its findings public. Now, this doesn't undermine the government policy and government legislation, it simply keeps all members of our society accountable. This would be the greatest power given to the presidency in Australia. Of course, the President would still hold the convention and act on the advice of the government when needed, traditionally. With the CPC model, we know that when a constitutional crisis does arise, the Council is equipped and ready to handle any crises in the best possible way. Ladies and gentlemen, in summary, the Commonwealth Presidential Council offers all the stability of the current system of government that is non-partisan and as a strong, independent constitutional umpire, with the unique quality of making Australia one of only three nations in the world, or one of only three other nations in the world, I should say, with a collective head of state. This is what I believe our republic should look like. Thank you all very much, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.